because it means that somehow something drew you to this meeting to learn and discover some things about yourself that is not average. So I want to begin with a statement that I hope will shock you. And here's the statement. Every human on earth was created to lead. Why should that statement shock you? Because the question that comes to your mind when you hear such a statement is this question. If everybody is a leader, then who's going to follow? That question is a result of a contaminated view of human value. It is a product of oppressive ideologies and belief systems that discriminate against the human dignity and has been perpetrated ever since the fall of man. And that is that some humans were born to lead while others were born to follow. This idea of subjugation of human dignity relegated to most of the human race is satanic. I believe that every human being was born to lead. I am convinced that no human came to earth to be a slave or to be a servant of another human. I am convinced with all my might that no human was created by God to be a second-class human or a second-class citizen. The fact that you have difficulty believing that every human cannot be a leader because someone has to follow is the reason why most of us don't achieve our full leadership potential. I have a picture of a gentleman on the screen. For those of you who are listening by radio, you may not be able to see. It's a photograph of a young local preacher who pastored a church of 300 people. Imagine a country preacher out in the country pastoring a little church of 300 people. He was trained in a seminary, and his only interest was to be a pastor of a little church. And some of you here today are just like him. You've got a church with 300 people, and people think that you are not important. But look at that man. Who would have thought that in that little church, every Sunday, standing before 300 people in a little town in Alabama, was a man who would change the world? I wonder who you are in your little church, speaking to your 300 people. How many people would have laughed at him and says, there's no way a little country preacher could change the world? There's no way a man who has no degree in leadership, no degree in philosophy, no degree in science could ever impact the whole world. That is why I believe everyone was created by God to be a leader, but not over people. I want to make a few statements about leadership. Whether you are young or old, I have come to tell you that you were born to be a leader, and we need you to discover your leadership. Why? Because nothing happens without leadership. Secondly, nothing changes without leadership. If leadership does not emerge, the world will remain the way it is. Nothing on earth has changed by itself when it comes to human development. Everything that has ever happened on earth in the human environment happened because someone took leadership. Thirdly, nothing develops without leadership. If you are going to develop this beautiful country with all of its natural resources and all of its great potential for becoming a world influence, there will have to be someone or some people who will emerge and take leadership responsibility. Nothing improves without leadership. If you don't like the situation in your nation or in your community or in your city or even in your family, then don't wait for it to change. It takes leadership to improve anything. Fifth, nothing is corrected without leadership. If something is going wrong in your home, in your community, in your nation, then leadership is necessary to correct it. Most of the time, religious people are useless because they spend too much time praying and no time acting. Prayer, they say, changes things. I disagree. Prayer creates the environment for things to change, but it takes a human to change it. And this is why the great leader, Jesus Christ, said, "Ask, and it shall be given unto you." That's prayer. But then he says, now get up and go seek. And then he says, when you find it, you got to knock because it's behind a closed door. You got to work to get it. In other words, answered prayer demands action. If you want a better country, don't just pray for a better country. Get involved in national development. Get involved in local politics. Get involved in social activities. Why? You cannot change something you tolerate. Nothing is corrected without leadership. And number 6, nothing advances without leadership. And that goes for your church, your company, your department, your nation, your organization, and your family. If you want to advance in any area, it takes someone to emerge as a leader, because nothing succeeds without leadership. This very event is only possible because somebody took responsibility to take leadership of my coming to this place. Nothing just happens. And therefore, we are always being led by someone. Because we are always being influenced by people, whether we know it or not, somebody is always leading us, whether we know it or not, then it's important for you to study the leaders in your life. One of the most important statements I've ever heard about leadership was made by a young Jewish rabbi 2,000 years ago. He was 30 years old. He made this statement. He said, if the blind lead the blind, they both fall into the ditch. It's important to read that statement slowly. He said, if the blind lead, which means that it's possible for someone to be in leadership and be blind. Not because a person has a title or a position, does it mean they have a vision. What he's telling us is vision is more important than a title. Vision is more important than a position. And this is why even in politics, in democracy, we don't create great leaders. Because democracy can produce a leader by vote, not by qualification. In other words, you can become a leader in government and don't know anything about leadership because you have no vision. And this is why voting in a church doesn't produce a good pastor. Because you can vote a pastor into the position, but he has no vision for the church. And if the blind lead the blind, the whole organization goes into a pit. So don't just follow people. Ask them a question. Where are you going? The Bible never says without a leader, the people perish. The Bible says without a vision, the people perish. So vision is more important than the leader. So I am not impressed with your title. I am Bishop Sam. I don't care. Where you going? I am Member of Parliament. Where are you taking your constituency? I am Reverend. Where are you going? I'm an evangelist. Where are you going? I'm the manager. Where are you taking the department? Vision qualifies leaders. If the blind lead the blind, they both fall into a ditch. So we are always being led. The question is, who's leading us and where are they leading us? And this is why it's important for you, in order to become the leader you were born to be, you must discover true leadership. When I first met Mr. Nelson Mandela years ago, I shook his hands. I was so humbled to meet such a great man. He had just come out of prison, 25 years, isolated from his own family, because he had a vision for his country. I had a meal with him, with a few other dignitaries, and I'll never forget, I asked him a question. This was over 17 years ago. I said, sir, in all that you've experienced, can you give me one of the things you learned about being a successful leader? And he gave me 5 answers. I will give you one of them. He said, true leaders never seek followers. Followers seek true leaders. So he said to me, son, if you want to be a leader, do not seek leadership. Seek a purpose for your life. And that changed my life forever. You were born to fulfill a purpose. You are not an experiment. You came to earth to fulfill an assignment. You didn't come to earth just to make a living. You came to earth to make a difference. So I have come into your life for these few moments to tell you, stop working for a salary and start working for an assignment. We need the right kind of leaders in the world. And this is why we cannot find effective leaders around our nations. Papua New Guinea is just like my country. We too are an island nation. The Bahamas in the Caribbean, where I'm from, is a nation that was also a British territory. We were also a colony of England, and we gained independence in 1973, just 3 years before you. We too were under British rule for over 200 years. We know what it is to be treated as second-class citizens. We know what it is to not have access to education. We know what it is to be told that our skin color restricts our advancement in life. We know what it feels like to be called ignorant and half-breed monkeys. I lived in that. I was born in 1954 in the colony. I remember there were restaurants we couldn't eat at because they were only reserved for white people. I know what it is to go to school that had no white person in it because we were not allowed to mix with them. I know what it is to stay on one side of the island and not enter the other side. I know what it is to be mentally damaged by segregation and racism. I'm not bitter, I'm just realist. I know what it is to mentally battle with the idea that I was not equal to other people. I overcame that only through a revelation, through Jesus Christ, about who I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who he says I am. It was that revelation that set me free. And from that day forward, I made a commitment to myself that I will travel the world. And I will hate the spirit of oppression. I hate racism. I hate segregation. I hate the devaluation of humans. All humans are completely equal in value. All 7 billion of them. No one in this room is less than the other. We are all equally made in God's wonderful image. We also carry his likeness, which means we have his ability. We function like our Creator. But we've been brainwashed to believe that is not true. And most of that has been done by erroneous leadership ideology that has been perpetrated by colonization. Let me give you a few things to remember that are very destructive in leadership. These are the kind of leaders we don't need. Write these down. Number one, politics without principles. We don't need any more politicians who have no principles. Number two, pleasure without conscience. We must not allow leaders in our lives who pursue pleasure at the expense of conscience. Number three, wealth without work. It will destroy us. People who pursue prosperity but don't want to perspire. If you don't work, you are a parasite to humanity. Number four, knowledge without character will destroy us. There are educated people who have no character. Scientifically, philosophically, intellectually advanced, but they have no moral conviction. These are dangerous leaders. And number five, business without morality will destroy us. And this is why corruption emerges in developing countries. People want to achieve financial security at the expense of morality. Business must have a moral foundation. And this is why selling drugs to make money is immoral. And this is why perpetrating prostitution on the streets with young ladies and men is immoral. Anytime you attempt to do business without moral conscience, you are a destructive force in humanity. This is why taking bribes is immoral. This is why padding the invoice and negotiating contracts with your own family who don't qualify for the contract is immoral. We need leaders who will not sacrifice their morality for the advancement of their business. And number 6, what will destroy us? Science without humanity. We are so scientifically advanced today that we can actually abort a baby with a pill. We call that advancement. I call it murder. When we can produce a nuclear weapon and then use it on our own families in the world, that's science without humanity. When we can build a computer and an internet system and then use it to destroy the moral fabric of our country with pornography, that is science without humanity. What kind of leadership do we have? And the last one is most important. What will destroy us? Worship without sacrifice. There are people who claim to represent God, but they don't live like God. They don't want to sacrifice to live a life that is worthy of representing who they worship. If you claim to be a pastor, then stay with one woman. Don't get quiet on me now. Worship without sacrifice is a destructive leader. There is no worship without sacrifice. There's no claim to being pure without discipline. You cannot claim to represent a holy God and live an unholy life. There has to be sacrifice. And this is why the religious people in the world are not respected anymore. Because we tell the world we are holy, and then the world knows our private lives. That's why Jesus Christ, the greatest leader that ever lived, didn't trust religious people. He never chose a religious person to join his organization. He only chose businessmen. He never went to the temple to find a disciple. He chose an accountant, Matthew. He chose a business team, Peter, James, and John. They owned a fishing company. He chose Luke. He was a doctor. How come he didn't choose the pastors? Because religious people tell lies. Everybody clap right there. Get it out. If you're going to represent who you claim to worship, then you should sacrifice and discipline yourself to live what you preach. We need leaders today who will sacrifice in order to be honest. What is leadership? I want to give you a definition that I introduced in my session last evening. All the books that you see available today in this session, you'll find details of what I'm talking about in the books, including this definition. I have studied leadership for 42 years, and I could not find a definition that was comprehensive enough to satisfy my investigation. So I penned this definition from a labor of 40 years. I have read over 217 books on leadership and couldn't find a definition that satisfied. I got degrees from university, studied all the great minds and the philosophers, and still couldn't find a definition that satisfied what I discovered about leadership from the greatest of all leaders, Yeshua. here is what I have concluded leadership is. Write it down. Leadership is the capacity to influence others through inspiration, generated by a passion, motivated by a vision, birthed by a conviction, which is produced by a sense of purpose. I will repeat. Leadership is very complicated and yet very simple. Leadership is the capacity to influence others through inspiration, generated by a passion, motivated by a vision, birthed from a conviction, which is produced by a sense of purpose. In other words, you were born to be a leader, but you will have to go through the process of becoming the great leader you were born to be. And the process requires that you follow a specific experience. For example, to become a leader, you must turn the sentence upside down and begin at the bottom. To become a true leader, you must first discover your purpose. And your purpose then produces in you a sense of conviction. That conviction begins to show up in pictures you call vision. That vision gives you a passion to pursue a future that is better than the present. And that passion is what inspires other people, which causes you to influence them by your passion. And they are able to follow you because they believe that you are willing to die for what you are pursuing. So what we call leadership, in most cases, is not leadership. It is simply glorified management. Notice this definition specifically states that leadership is the capacity to influence others through inspiration. Inspiration is the opposite of manipulation. Most of the people you call leaders are simply professional manipulators. Leaders don't manipulate people. To manipulate means you threaten people. You play with their emotions. You play with their fears. That's not leadership. That's dictatorship. True leaders never manipulate. They inspire. Why do we so admire Mr. Nelson Mandela? He never asked you to follow him. But we are inspired by his passion, for his conviction, based on his purpose for his country. Why do we admire Martin Luther King Jr.? He never asked us to follow him. But we are inspired by his passion, based on his conviction, driven by his sense of purpose for his people. Why do we admire Mahatma Gandhi? Because we are inspired by his passion, based on his conviction, dedicated to his sense of purpose for his people. Why do we admire Mother Teresa? Because we are inspired by this young lady's passion, dedicated by her conviction for the people on the streets who are poor. Why are we not inspired by you? Because you haven't found a conviction that produces a passion based on a sense of purpose that you're willing to die for. You came to earth to produce a passion. So let me ask you some questions about leadership. Does leadership require followers? Just think about it. Is it necessary for leaders to have titles? Mother Teresa had no title. Martin Luther King Jr. had no title. Nelson Mandela was a prisoner. How's that for a title? Moses was a convict. How's that for a title? Jesus was a rebel. What kind of title do you need to be a leader? I discovered something about titles. People who are doing nothing need many titles. Let me say it again. People who are ineffective and doing nothing need many titles. The more effective you become as a leader, the less titles you need. So I'm very suspicious when I meet people who got many titles. It means they are doing nothing. My name is Reverend Dr. Bishop Evangelist Potentate. You are sick. The more successful you are as a leader, the less titles you need. As a matter of fact, to test your greatness as a leader, you must reduce your life to your first name. If you don't believe me, study the great leaders of history. We never say Bishop Moses. We just say Moses. We don't say Evangelist Joshua. We just say Joshua. We don't say Right Reverend Honorable Daniel. We simply say Daniel. What's your problem? Well, I'm not coming to the meeting because they printed my name incorrectly. They didn't say Reverend Bishop. You are sick. The greater you become, the less names you need. Jose, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Peter, James, John, Jesus. What's your problem? Uh-oh. Sometimes people give me their cards. It takes me 2 weeks to read the name on the card. Right away I know they're not doing anything. Obama. It's enough. Kennedy. That's enough. What's your problem? Leadership is not about titles. Is leadership a matter of distinction of superiority? In other words, some people think that leadership means that you are superior to other people. This is completely satanic. Some think that leadership is a disposition of advantage. That means I was born in a better family, in a better village than you, so I must be better than you. You are sick. Jesus Christ was born in a cave. His first crib was an animal trough. And yet today he rules the universe. It doesn't matter where you were born. It's who was born in that place. You were born in that place. A great person was born in that place. Clap your hands for being born in this great country. Some think that leadership has to do with some qualities of leadership or the manifestation of intellect. Have you noticed that people with PhDs always work for people who ain't got none? Let me say it again. People who got master's degrees and PhDs always work for those who don't have any. Because leadership is not about intellectual advancement. Some of the greatest leaders in the world never finished college, dropped out of school. You know, one of the great American presidents, Ronald Reagan, didn't finish school. He was an actor in Hollywood. Most of the time, his acting didn't succeed. Couldn't even act. When he became the president of the United States, they asked him in an interview, they said, "You're not a college graduate. You don't have any degrees. How come you are such a successful president?" His answer was a very smart answer. He said, "Well, I staff my weaknesses." Okay, let me break it down for you. He said, "I hire people, wherever I'm weak, I hire the smart people to work for me." In other words, people who are in leadership are not there because of intellect. They're there because they discovered a purpose and a passion and a dream. Mr. Reagan had a dream. His dream was a world without communism, a world without the wall in Europe. And so his passion constantly was, tear the wall down. He didn't need a degree to pursue that passion. And he inspired the world, and they tore the wall down. What inspires you? Leadership does not mean superior intellect. It doesn't mean you are smarter than other people cognitively. In other words, true leaders is not about the race that you're from or the class that you're from. This is why I'm very adamant about stamping out this spirit of superior oppression by those who claim to be smarter or wiser or better or greater or more intellectually advanced than anyone else. This is wrong. Everyone in this room is a great leader trapped in a follower. And my passion is to bring that leader out, hidden in that follower. Every woman in here is an awesome woman. Every man in here is a great world changer. But you have to believe that yourself. Sitting next to you is one of the greatest persons in the world, and you don't know who they are yet, but you're going to be glad you sat next to them in the next 5 years. Shake their hand right now. Tell them congratulations. And this is why I tell people that leadership depends on the philosophy that a person has, because your philosophy controls how you interpret life. Your philosophy controls how you interpret people and how you value people. It guides your life on how you think about life. Philosophy is the framework for leaders on how they make their decisions. And this is why this conference is so important. I am not here to make you shout and say hallelujah. I am here to attack your ideas. I am here to attack your philosophy, your belief system, because until your mind changes, you will never change. And your philosophy is simply the way you've been conditioned to think that you believe to be true. And much of what you believe is not true, because both of us as people have been products of colonialism, which have brainwashed us to believe that we are not equal to everybody else in capability and potential and value. And we are historically struggling with that still. Let me quote something that's very important, written by the richest man that ever lived. He said something to all third world people I think is very critical. His name is Solomon. Solomon wrote this. He says, "Woe to the land when a slave becomes king." Let me quote it slowly. It's found in the book of Ecclesiastes. He said, "Woe to the land when a slave becomes king." Let me quote it for the third time, because that's happening right here in Papua New Guinea. Woe to the land when a slave becomes king. What does he mean by that? Woe means damned. It's a horrible word. It's in the Bible. Woe to the land means that the land is damned, it is condemned when the leader thinks like a slave. That's in the Bible. Don't look at me like that. I'm going to quote it one more time. woe to the land when the slave becomes king. What does he mean? He means that when a person who thinks like a slave becomes the pastor of the church or the manager of the department or the leader of a country, that whole organization is in trouble. Because wearing a crown does not change your mind. It exposes your mentality. A position does not change disposition. A title does not change mentality. And that's why the quickest way to reveal a person's character and philosophy is to give them power and money. If you want to know what a person is like, give them power. It reveals their mindset. That's why Solomon says, woe to the land when a slave becomes king. If somebody is given power but didn't have a mental transformation, then that entire organization or country is in trouble. Your way of thinking, your philosophy will manifest what kind of leader you will be. That goes for husbands in the family, pastors in the church, managers in the company, and politicians in the country. How you think affects the people. So Solomon also wrote this: as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You cannot rise above your belief system. You cannot rise above your convictions of your mental agreement with yourself. You cannot rise above what you consider to be true. And that's why, in order for you to change, you must change your thinking. And this is why Proverbs 23 is so important. He says, for as a man thinking in his heart, so is he. The word heart actually means your subconscious mind. It means your human hard drive. It's where you hide the things you believe to be true. Your heart is your center of belief. And every human has a center of belief. There are things you believe about yourself that you got from other people, and it may not be true. Papua New Guinea is a great country. It has awesome people. But my question is, are you still struggling with 200 years of mental oppression? Wearing a necktie doesn't change your mentality. Living where the British used to live doesn't change your mentality. Having the title the British had doesn't change your mentality. It exposes it. My question is, what do you believe about yourself? And where did you get that belief from? The word belief, write it down, belief. It's a Greek word in the New Testament. It's the word pistis, P-I-S-T-I-S. The word belief, pistis, when you translate it, it's the word faith. Faith. Faith is simply belief. The Apostle Paul, the great leader of the first century, said these words. He said, faith comes by hearing. What is faith? Belief. Belief comes by what you hear. I was told by a Scottish teacher when I was 13 years old in a class with 36 black kids in my island in the Caribbean. He stood before the class and he was angry. He turned red and he said to us, you are stupid black people. You cannot learn, he says. You are ignorant. You are half-breed monkeys. I'll never forget that day. He looked at me. He says, you are retarded. And then he said these words, I'm wasting my time on you black children. Your brain is not developed. You are half-breed monkeys. I sat there and wept. Just a kid. And I almost believed him. Because I was getting grades of F in his class. And I said to myself, maybe I am a monkey. Maybe I am retarded. I went home to my mother weeping that day. And she said, what happened to you, son? I said, my teacher said I'm a half-breed monkey. I'm retarded. I can't learn. I am not developed as a human. I am still a half animal. And my mother grabbed me by my dirty shirt and she shook me and she said, "Don't you ever say that again." And I wept. And then my mother picked up a big black book that she always read. And she turned it to a page and she gave it to me. She said, "Now you go back to that little dirty room over there and you memorize that statement in this book. And I want you to memorize it till you don't have to read it anymore." I went back to that dirty little room in that wooden house on 4 big rocks in a village that was the poorest in my country. And I sat on a pile of dirty clothes in that wooden room, memorized one statement that she gave me. I'll never forget the statement. It went like this: "Now unto him who is able to do exceeding abundantly above, far beyond all you can ever ask, think, or imagine, according to the power that worketh within you." Suddenly, the light came on in a little boy. As I kept reading it, "Now unto him who was able to do exceedingly abundantly above, far beyond all I can ever ask, think, or imagine, according to the power that worketh within me." And I kept repeating it. And suddenly, a little boy was born at age 13. I realized for the first time in my life that a white teacher from Scotland was not the power, that the power was in me. And that I could imagine anything, and the Creator would do above what I imagined. And I started imagining being an A student. I went back to school the next day and I made a decision. I will never trust another teacher. So I picked up all the books in school and I memorized everything in the books myself. I never allowed that teacher to teach me again. I memorized everything in the history book, in the geography book. I memorized the entire mathematics books and algebra. I memorized every single geometry aspect of everything. I knew everything. I memorized it. I went home and memorized every book. And in 4 months, I went from an F student to an A student. Within 6 months, I was the #1 student in the school. At the end of the semester, I graduated top of the whole class and top of the school. And I'll never forget, when I got my grades, the teacher from Scotland came to me. His name was Mr. Robinson. He said, "Young man, I'm so proud of you." I said, "No thanks to you, sir. You're not my teacher. Remember, I'm a monkey." I never trusted him. Today, my books are textbooks in that same school. I graduated from that school top of the class. And our country had just become independent when I graduated. 1973. And the government couldn't find any black teachers because they never trained us to teach. So I went from high school straight into teaching. The government paid us, students who graduated, to become teachers of the younger kids. We never had teacher training because our country didn't have anyone to teach. Because when we became independent, all the white people left and ran. And I became a teacher at the same school where they call me a monkey. A few years ago, I was in England, and I was facilitating a leadership training seminar in London, downtown, in a beautiful hotel. And the place was packed with people. And at the end of this seminar, I was in the auditorium of the lobby of the hotel. I was autographing books. And there was a long line of people in the hall. And suddenly I saw an old man walking up to the table. He was shaking from age. He was walking with a cane. And he came up to the table and he gave me 2 of my books. One of them was brand new. The other one was an old book. And he said, "Can you autograph these for me, please?" I said, "Yes, sir." I autographed them, thanked him for coming to the seminar, and I gave them back to him. And he stood there, wouldn't leave. He just kept looking at me. I said, "Sir, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate you being part of our seminar today. Will you please allow the others to come?" And he just stood there in the front of the table looking at me. And after 5 minutes, everybody became irritated, including me. And I said, "Sir, thank you so much for coming. Will you please allow others to come?" And he just looked at me and he began to cry. And he said, "I used to live in the Bahamas." I said, "You did?" I said, "Where?" "I used to live in Nassau." I said, "Sir, that's the island I'm from. What did you do there?" And he said, "I used to be a teacher." I said, "Where did you teach?" He said, "C.H. Reeves High School." I said, "That's the high school I came from, sir." He said, "I know. You don't remember me, do you?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "I'm Mr. Robertson." I jumped up from my chair. I couldn't even recognize him. He was so old. I grabbed him and hugged him, and we wept. And everybody was watching us in that lobby. A handsome black young man hugging an old dying white man. And we kissed each other on the cheek, and he cried. His tear fell on my suit. And he said, "You changed my life." I said, "How did I change your life?" He said, "Your books are in Scotland in all the bookstores. And I read 4 of your books, and they changed my life. I now understand who I am. And I love Jesus, and I want to thank you. I came all the way from Scotland, took the train to come here. I wanted to see you because I heard you were coming to London, and I just wanted to come and tell you thanks." And I said, "Mr. Robertson, you read my books?" He said, "Your books are the most important books in my library." I said, "You mean you read the writings of a monkey?" I wonder who you are. You are a leader trapped in a follower under other people.